Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a special late night edition of the Sports Note. I'm your host, Jim Crinity. We actually saw a little bit of history and not in the way that you might think in college basketball tonight. It was actually announced, and this almost could be considered breaking news, but we won't do a special on that. That legendary Syracuse head coach of 47 years, Jim Boeheim, actually their most recent contest, their loss earlier tonight at the buzzer to Wake Forest in the second round of the ACC tournament, is more than likely going to be Boeheim's final game as the head coach of the university. Boeheim, it was actually announced on Tuesday going into the ACC tournament that his future for next season was going to be in the hands of the university. And then the university, after the loss, actually made it clear that this would be that Boeheim would be leaving after this season. Boeheim is actually going to be replaced by one of his assistants, and now leaves behind a very, very indelible legacy. But it's also not without a little bit of controversy, and we're going to cover all of that here. Boeheim, very, very polarizing coach. Syracuse, very, very polarizing type of program, especially in the last maybe 15 years. Syracuse was always, competitive, but was never amongst the elite, during a very, very early portion of Boeheim's tenure. There were a, there were a litter of Sweet 16 appearances. There was an Elite 8 in 1989, but most of those were second round exits, a couple of NITs in there. Then they started to break through in the mid 90s, got to a Sweet 16 in 94. They were the national runner up in 96 to eventual to I want to say, was that Kentucky? Um, that was that actually was the yes, that was Kentucky. Talk about two teams that I absolutely can't stand. Uh, and then and then there were a couple more Sweet 16s in 98 and 2000. Then they finally broke through, winning the national championship in 2003 with a certain guy you might have heard of, who's also going to be in the Basketball Hall of Fame, although not my first choice, in Carmelo Anthony. Boeheim achieved five Final Fours in 1987, 96, 2003, 2013, 2016. 10 Big East regular season championships, 5 Big East tournament championships, and again the 2003 national championship. He was the AP, NABC, and Naismith Coach of the Year in 2010, where when Syracuse was 30-5, but were subsequently bounced in the Sweet 16 very unceremoniously. Might we add, in a scenario where anything short of the Final Four for them was going to be considered an utmost failure. But really, since they moved to the ACC in 2013, they've been competitive, but they've not been nearly what they were with the better competition. Whereas they were one of the top teams in the Big East for all those years. Since moving to the ACC with the 2013-2014 season, they did get to the Final Four in 16, but they had a couple of Sweet 16s. They got bounced in the second round. They went out in the first round in 2019. They got to the NIT in 2017. Didn't even go to a postseason in 2015 and also last year, and certainly won't this year with their record of 17-15. I don't honestly see a scenario where they'll go to the NIT, considering there's other teams that are not going to get into the big dance once the pairings are announced on Sunday that would actually be more deserving out of the ACC to get into March Madness. You've actually got NC State, who's going to get in, Virginia Tech, who's getting dominated at this very moment at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. They're getting almost they are getting doubled up by NC State in that second round matchup. Virginia Tech's going to finish with about 19. They're going to finish with 19 wins, barring a dramatic comeback. But they'll get into. There's a possibility they could be a low end seed. Maybe a 9, 10, 11, possibly a 12, or even, in the play-in games, so to speak, this time next week when the dance kicks off, or they could actually be one of the higher seeds for the NIT. You actually could have North Carolina is clinging on by the skin of their teeth. You're going to have, Pittsburgh's going to get in. After their win, now moving on to the quarterfinals. But it's all a matter of, with as strong as the Big Ten is, and the breadth of talent that's in the Pac-12 this year, the SEC, is the ACC going to send 6, 7, 8 teams? Where some of these other teams are going to get in. So Syracuse, their run is probably going to come to an end. They would more than likely decline an invitation to the CBI. But the aspect about Boeheim, if this is truly the end, you cannot argue with the pedigree. 1,015 wins, although the scandal. The Fab Melo scandal, and also the secondary scandal with the grade changings, where they got punished in 2015, took away over 100 victories off of his total, 101 to be exact, where the university was allowed to keep their banners in the arena, but they had to forfeit all the wins during that time. Boeheim actually had to sit and was suspended the first 9 games of the ACC regular season that year, and it was also the third largest vacation of wins by a major college program. The only ones that were larger were the 113 by Michigan in the wake of the Chris, what some people call the Chris Webber scandal, which was technically the Ed Martin scandal, and then of course the Louisville basketball sex scandal that eventually ended up costing Rick Pitino his job in the aftermath here. Excuse me. But Boeheim, with the national championship, the 5 Final Fours, the five Big East championships. He's also got 3 gold medals as an assistant coach for Team USA during the 3 Olympics from 2016 prior. So that would be 16, 12, and 08. He's also got a gold medal with some of the World Championships, 2010 in Turkey, 2014 in Spain. He's got a couple of bronze dating all the way back to 1990 with in Argentina, 2006 in Japan. He's got a gold medal for 2007 with the FIBA Americas Championship. He was inducted into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame back in 2005 in his first year of eligibility. And then when the College Basketball Hall of Fame was established in 2006, he was one of several hundred that were actually in that inaugural class, including 30, 40 head coaches at that point. Boeheim has got 48 tournament wins, although again some of those were stripped. He's 13-8 in the NIT, but you cannot argue his pedigree. However, if you think of some of the greatest coaches in college basketball, yeah, he's definitely on that list. But let's put this also into a little bit of perspective. If you're going to talk about the pantheon, the Mount Rushmore of college basketball coaches. I think as great as Boeheim is, and the fact that he's sitting sixth on the all-time list in those 101 victories that were stripped, those actually would have put him at fourth, only behind Mike Krzyzewski in terms of, you know, Division One coaches, because a lot of the other coaches in the interim were at much smaller programs. Um, I don't know if he's on the mountain all time. I honestly don't. I would have to say, in no particular order, you're going to have to go Mike Krzyzewski, naturally, but when you've got the all time record. Um, you can't ignore that. You've got to put John Wooden up there. You'd have to put Dean Smith up there. And I'd actually have to say, as much as it pains me to say it, I'd have to say Adolph Rupp, even though I was, you know, I was I don't even think my parents were born when Rupp was no longer coaching at Kentucky, and I wasn't. I think I was very very young when during Wooden's final years at UCLA. I know for a fact that my father was the biggest UCLA fan you'll ever meet, having never actually gone there, which is even more amazing. So it's but I would actually say, if you're going to put it in perspective in terms of March Madness, he's going to go on the two line. You're going to put him on with guys like Bobby Knight. You're going to put him on there with guys like John Calipari. You're going to put them on and even his protege, Rick Pitino. But the problem is that with all of those guys, they've got national championships. They've got multiple national championships, and outside, I want to say that there's only one other coach on that list, and I think it might be Patino that has um, just one Coach of the Year honor. But the other aspect about that is why you might have to put him on the one line is, again, having 101 victories stripped for a scandal that he was directly tied to. And I don't see, when you've got guys like Smith, Rupp, and people who are going to say, well, what about Adolph Rupp? He was actually the head coach during the 1951 point shaving scandal at Kentucky. Well, evidence later pointed, as I researched earlier this evening, that none of the evidence really tied to him directly or indirectly. So he actually was not even, quite honestly, aware of the entire issue as it was ongoing. So even though there was a major scandal, you can't put any of it on Rupp. Krzyzewski ran a very clean program. Duke was never really hit with, sanctions that cost them NCAA, berths, had winnings, had victories stripped, had banners taken down. Say what you want about Duke. Mike Krzyzewski was not only the greatest coach. You could actually make an argument. I would love to actually see the argument between Krzyzewski and John Wooden. Sure, John Wooden's got more national championships, but Krzyzewski's got more wins, and the pool is a lot more watered down when Duke was in their heyday, whereas it was UCLA and everybody else. Let's be honest, back in the '70s, but Boeheim also was he was very polarizing at times as a head coach. We have heard about how charitable he can be. He did actually. He was one of the co-founders of the Jim and Julie Boeheim Foundation, which actually is devoted towards child welfare, cancer treatment, and prevention. And it's because Boeheim was diagnosed with prostate cancer back in 2001. So that was part of the reason of the foundation being established. But Boeheim was also relatively polarizing or controversial with some of the other aspects, especially later on in his career with the media, certainly tied to his reaction in the wake of the punishment for the sanctions back in 2015. Within the last year or so, he received criticism for for comments about the height of a reporter in a press conference. Um, we remember a few years ago where even though he was cleared of being liable, he did strike and kill a an individual standing near the side of the road. Although again, the everything you can't really put that on him. It was all the evidence point to there was nothing he could do to kind of avoid the issue, even though he was speeding. But even if he wasn't, the gentleman would not have survived had he been, you know, for the nature of it. He it was a dark road. I want to say it was raining, um, and he hit a passenger of a disabled car who there were no emergency lights on. He could never have seen them. The driver was wearing the dark clothing. So again, Boeheim was not charged. He was cleared of any wrongdoing, and it was truly ruled an accident, as unfortunate as it was. But Boeheim, with the foundation, definitely it's helping a lot of people. And let's also remember um, that not a whole lot of people remember this. Um, and I wanted to bring that out. I wanted to bring this up before we kind of close out here. There was a game back in the very early 1980s, and I think I remember seeing stock footage of this somewhere. Boeheim, at a Syracuse home game, got on the microphone and threatened his team in the middle of the game to walk off the floor and forfeit, not out of protest, not because they were getting blown out, but because the students were shouting racial threats at an opposing player and also throwing items at that same player. The opponents were the Georgetown Hoyas. The head coach was John Thompson, the Hall of Famer. The player was eventual basketball Hall of Famer Patrick Ewing. So it shows you just what kind of man and teacher that Jim Boeheim was, even that early on in his career. Um, Flash forward 40 years, and we actually see that Boeheim's become a Hall of Fame head coach. John Thompson was a Hall of Fame head coach. Patrick Ewing is a Hall of Fame player. Um, Syracuse won a national championship and became one of the predominant programs in all of college basketball. Um, so it just goes to show how great of a teacher and how great of a man Jim Boeheim was, and also the luxury of being able to coach both of his kids at the same time a few years ago. His son Buddy, as we all remember, he's currently now a two-way player within the Detroit Pistons organization, and he's currently now down with their G League team. I want to say they're in Fort Wayne. I don't follow the G League really at all, but even though the decision was not made by Boeheim to kind of go out on his own terms, we had to know something like this was going to be coming with the fact that he originally was going to retire back in 2018, and then when his expected successor Mike Hopkins left to take over the head coaching job at Washington, it kind of left Boeheim, his staff, the university, the program, all of it, in a state of what do we do now? And I definitely don't want to call it flux, because that's what they're in now, is a state of flux. Because there was no plan in place for Boeheim to bow out this quickly or abruptly. But when Hopkins left, Boeheim extended his contract almost an indefinite period of time. But he's now 78 years old. He would be 79 very early into next season, and it's kind of time to move on. We saw, Krzyzewski step aside after 42 years at Duke last year, where they almost won yet another national championship. It would have been his sixth, but there's a lot of kind of restructuring and definitely flux within the Syracuse program, because Syracuse is going to recruit, and Syracuse is still going to be a good program, but they're not going to have the kind of rebound like Duke had this year, turning it over to John Shire, where Duke is probably going to be a 5 seed or better when the pairings are announced on Sunday. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment box below. Where do you think Boeheim ranks all time? Would you put him on that 1 line? Is he on the mountain? Would you put him on a 2 line? Would you put him on a 3 line? Where do you think Syracuse goes from here? Does Syracuse possibly get a postseason berth with that average record? And what are you guys looking forward to when the tournament starts next week? And I will be back with you guys hopefully here early next week, and we will be back with you guys live 1 week from tomorrow, St. Patrick's Day night, with the first annual YZ Awards. I talked to Mike earlier tonight. We are actually going to be having everything laid out on Saturday night in advance, and we will be ready to go, and we hope that you all will join us. Take care, everyone. Good night.